what I would like to do, with just a few minutes over after 3 o'clock, I'm Jennifer Coffey. I am the program lead for the State Personnel Development Grant Program. Kelsey, of course, is here with us as well, making everything happen. Kelsey Leib. And then we have our presenters. In just a moment, I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you. I did want to share one resource with you before we get started that I think might be helpful as we're thinking about stakeholder engagement. This is a resource from CSEP, who many of you know, the State Implementation and Scaling Up of Evidence-Based Practices TA Center. And I'll put the link to this resource in the chat in a moment. But it's some stakeholder engagement guidance that has this really helpful visual about consideration. So it's some questions to ask and some considerations when you're making decisions on what you need to engage on, who you need to engage, how you're going to engage. I think they're important questions. We can delve into it deeper at a later time, but I wanted you at least to have one new tool related to stakeholder engagement, since we're going to be talking about partnerships and engaging today, and I'll help you go a little bit deeper. Great. So, and I appreciate that about authenticity, Carrie. So I'm very excited. I think some of you have already shared with you before. I'm very excited about both presentations today. When we think about community partnerships, that can look a million different ways. And so we just have two examples of groups that are doing it really well and are doing something innovative. And our first presentation is going to be from the folks from Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools, formerly known as Project Unify. And the second will be from the Idaho SPDIG and their library system, who they're partnering with through this SPDIG. Each of those groups, when they introduce themselves, they're going to talk about how they came to this work. Who did they meet along the way? What events happened that led them here? Their why for doing this work. We know each one of you is so passionate about what you do, and it's great to be able to hear the stories. So Andrea Kahn and Jennifer Cartland from Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools, we're so glad to have you today, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. We're really thrilled to be here. I'm going to introduce myself and briefly introduce Jennifer. She's going to introduce herself in a minute. I'm going to speed through some of the information that we have, because we want to make sure we have time to have some conversations and some breakouts. And I am going to share my screen, which is also a tricky operation, as always. So let me start doing that before I start talking, so that
looks great.
Okay, good. That's a good sign. I'm Andrea Kahn. I've been with Special Olympics for 33 years. I am Vice President of Unified Champion Schools, working in the United States, leading all of our work with youth and schools. And I've been involved in the Unified Champion Schools program since its inception in 2008. It's been a great collaboration and partnership with OSEP the entire time. And we have learned a lot in these 14 years, and we continue to learn every minute. I'm sure I'll learn tons of things today by having the opportunity to chat with all of you. And Jennifer is an educator with a ton of experience in city school districts. She's been an administrator, a principal, a teacher. She's now a coach and a leadership development consultant for us and for other entities as well. My why for this, and the why for this program, comes from years of the entire history of Special Olympics, really focusing on using sport as a platform for inclusion, for social inclusion, but really focusing so much in the first part of our history on the making sure that the sports were the highest quality possible, that our athletes were getting the best training possible, that they were looked at as true and significant athletes with abilities and capabilities. As we have evolved, we are focusing more on the outcome of sport as a unifier and a builder of of so many competencies. And we have learned that our athletes have much more to give than anybody ever gave them credit for. And our inclusive and unified sports programming is a really important part of that. So as we learned what we could accomplish with a more unified approach, and we saw the challenges that were happening in schools for all kids. And our chairman, Tim Shriver, is an educator and believes very strongly in the power of the person with intellectual disability or different ability to be able to bring a lot more to the equation than anyone ever gave them credit for, so that we are not always in that helper mode where the person that is being given supports is seen as needy, and that we are providing services, but that we collaborate together and build on everybody's gifts and skills so that everybody can benefit. So now Special Olympics is an organization that I would say is definitely not just for people with intellectual disabilities, but it is for everybody, and it has benefits for everybody. So you have to move past what you already think, perhaps, or what the strong image that you have from your own experience with Special Olympics, to think about our work in schools. In schools, we're focused on the outcome, as I said, of social inclusion. So the sport by itself is just not an adequate way to think about this work. We use sport as a platform in combination with other activities and other aligned interventions. The data that is out there that we all know about how movement and exercise can contribute to student success, how connections and friendships are so important for all students' well-beings, how social emotional skill development and all of these non-academic activities all contribute to a student's academic success. The science is there, we know that it's true. And we also know that it's true that our Unified Champion Schools model is a contributing factor to all of those things. We have evidence that shows we contribute to student success, to a social inclusion mindset, to positive academic and social emotional outcomes. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. And let me just give you a little bit more information about what Unified Champion Schools is, the definition. It is not a team, it is not a season of sports, it is not a curriculum, it's not a 6-week program, it's not something that's in a box, it's a strategy, it's intentional in design, and it uses 3 components of unified sports, which is sports where people with and without intellectual disabilities are on the same teams together. You can do that in almost any sport, anything from golf and bowling all the way to flag football, volleyball, basketball. And it's also at every grade level. So we have inclusive motor activity skill development from ages 2 to 7 and everything in between. We also include inclusive youth leadership. Again, it looks different at every grade level. And the third component is the whole school engagement. These 3 components are all very critical to the success and the impacts that we're having. So it's a multi-tiered structure with the 3 components. Like I said, there's a lot of flexibility at every grade level. It looks different. We have, interscholastic sports at the high school level, and we have, classroom activities and unified PE in the elementary and middle school and high school. We have a college program as well, where the recreational program is conducting unified with community athletes with intellectual disabilities. So all of these components work together. And just to give you a little bit more information about that, obviously the sport is very important, and that's where you're learning about, you're making friends, you're getting to know people who have different abilities than you. Friendships are made, but beyond the friendships, then when you have inclusive youth leadership, where it could be clubs, it could be activity projects that students work on together. You learn how to work together for a common cause. Students are doing all kinds of projects together. A lot of times aligned with the sports, but sometimes they're just projects that support the school programming. And then most important is the third component to me, the whole school engagement, which ties it all together. This is where you're creating inclusion as a norm for the entire school, breaking down that need for students to expend their social capital, because assemblies take place where all kids come to the assemblies. The students with intellectual disabilities, the special needs students, are not in a separate building, a separate class, a separate hallway. They're eating lunch at the same time. They're part of the morning announcements. The students' pep rallies for sports include the unified sports teams. They're eating, did I say this? They're eating lunch together. They're not sort of segregated within the school. They become part of the fabric. And that looks different at every grade level, but that is so important because, like I said, when the norm is inclusion, then nobody has to expend their social capital in order to be inclusive. And this is huge for adolescents. Adolescents have a really hard time being out there and being in front. And so if we give them the opportunity to see that this is expected behavior and is promoted and supported and honored behavior, then everyone will be more able to do it. We see a huge decrease in bullying in our schools and in negative language and stereotyping and all of those things. So this is such a snapshot, and I'm really happy to answer questions after this presentation. I hope you had a chance to look at the pre-reads. If you didn't, we'll make sure that you get them. But let me just give you a little bit more of the history and the elements of the strategy. Currently, we're in 7,300 schools. Our goal is to be in 10,000 by 2023. We're on track to reach that number. We had a little bit of a lag during COVID, but we're back at pace. We've been partnering, as I said, with OSEP for 14 years. This is an evidence-based strategy. We have done a very rigorous evaluation and lots of research projects throughout the 14 years. And we have a ton of information about all aspects of our programming, from implementation to impact on individuals to impact on the schools. It is, as I said, a flexible strategy within a very strict framework of criteria. We know that we have to meet schools where they are. Districts are all grappling with different contexts and scenarios, and our strategy is very adaptable to all different contexts, whether it's suburban, rural, urban. Social inclusion is what we're all about, and school climate is a major outcome that we're looking for. Youth innovation and integration. As I said in the chat, we've had a lot of success with the youth leadership clubs, the unified clubs, where students are working together and where they're working on leadership teams with their schools to support the activities to make their schools more inclusive. Teacher professional development is always really important. We have a lot of programming to support a relationship at the school district level. Obviously, that is a critical part of any multi-school strategy. And then we are very proud of the way we've been able to adapt to the moment. We have been able to pivot, that famous word, pivot, during COVID to a much more virtual set of resources and tools and activities, and that are now combining with our in-person activities to make for a really rich combination of resources and approaches to meet all the various needs. So that is what Unified Champion School is, why we are doing what we're doing. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer now. She's going to talk a little bit about some of those impacts and the impacts on the families, and really start to think about how this can support some of the work that you're doing.
Andrea, can I ask you one question before we?
Certainly.
Because it came up earlier today in a conversation I had with a state. If they wanted to, if a state wants to see if they could bring in Unified Champion Schools, can they contact you to talk about that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
They were also
Absolutely.
wondering about cost, but we could talk about that.
We come to the table with resources.
Okay, great. Thank
And we are in every state in the country, except for Alabama.
you. Okay. I'll have to look and see if anyone from Alabama is on today, but that's good to know. I had one other question too about what you just shared. And it's a little bit on the depressing side, but do you all look at stats on suicide in the schools that you're in? We know that it's rising.
That's a great question. I don't know. No, one of the things that we've recently is we have aligned our data with the NCES data so that we can track a lot of the other academic outcomes. I don't know if suicide rates are part of that or not, but that's a really interesting idea. I'll make a note of that because I think it would be.
Yeah, it made me think of it because the practices that you're talking, the effects that it has, the helping.
I have a lot of anecdotal stories that I can share about parents who think it has had an impact on their children in that regard, but I don't have any data.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
All right, Jennifer, thank you for taking over from here. Jennifer.
Thank you, thank you, Andrea. And hello, everyone. Happy to be a part of this conversation this afternoon. As Andrea said, my name is Jennifer Cartland, and I'm a consultant with the Unified Champion Schools group with Special Olympics North America, and have been working with the team for a little over a year, specifically on an initiative called Unified Champion City Schools, where the focus is specifically on bringing Unified Champion Schools to cities and to those communities that likely have very deep needs connected to the kinds of things that we bring through UCS. So Andrea kind of did I'm supposed to talk about my why. Didn't want to leave that out. So Andrea gave a little bit of a backdrop of who I am and how I got here. One of the major roles that I had prior to becoming a consultant was a local school principal here in Washington, D.C. I happened to be the principal of a 3-campus school, so I had little ones from early childhood all the way up through 8th graders who were getting ready to graduate and go to high school. And within each of those 3 campuses had some students with physical disabilities and some with intellectual disabilities. And I recall as a principal feeling like it was my responsibility, it was my job, it was I was tasked with protecting the young people that had those varying disabilities. And it was concerning to me as I evolved through my leadership to recognize that didn't feel right, that there was something not quite right about just needing to be the one to kind of be the shepherd and the soldier for these young people. And in a conversation with the woman who ended up connecting me to Andrea, I shared that, and she said, that's the feeling of a lot of individuals until they understand the power and impact that you can have when there's really an inclusive mindset in a full school community. And when you get away from being kind of that principal, it goes back to what Andrea said about helping. The difference between what I thought of myself as a leader then and what I think of myself as a leader now is that I am about forging the collaborations that allow inclusivity to happen. And if I had had that information when I was a principal, I think I would have had a more inclusive culture in each of those 3 campuses that I led, and the young people would have benefited even more deeply. And so hearing about Unified Champion Schools and hearing about the work and the impact that the UCS program initiative has been able to have has really resonated with me, both from that historical perspective and the perspective of the work that I do now and continue to do through UCCS with SONA. So that's a little bit of my why. Andrea did a great job in her first few slides in talking about this connection that has happened with UCS in the more than 7,000 schools that UCS has partnered with across the last 14 years of this connection to OSEP. And I think the important thing that I wanted to point out is that our story is a combination of all the factors that Andrea spoke about. We're excited about the outcomes that are coming out, and that's what's listed on this slide. It makes several of these outcomes really clear for us. And these are the things that parents, families, teachers, administrators, district leaders alike are all looking for, regardless of what your vantage point is. These are the kinds of things that you want to know are occurring in the schools that you're sending your children to, the schools that you're serving, the schools that are in your community. You want to know that there is an increase in the social skills that students are getting in those buildings, that there is a reduction in bullying. Jennifer's question was a really pertinent one in the climate that we're in right now, particularly as we all make our way through this plague and figure out how we're going to operate with one another, and to know that this initiative can help contribute to a climate that is improved, that is more inclusive, that is more understanding, that is more unified. These are the kinds of things that we're looking for. And like other successful school-based programs, UCS thrives when the key stakeholders, the students, the staff, the administrators, the caregivers, and the families are all aligned around a key mission. And for us, that key mission is inclusion. When we have an inclusive culture, it is more meaningful for every single one of those stakeholders that I described than almost anything else. And the involvement and engagement of families has deep and lasting effects on long-term program success. So I say that from my perspective as a former school leader, as a district leader, as someone who now supports and coaches leadership teams and groups in schools. Everyone wants to know that whatever they're taking on is going to not only have immediate impacts, but long-term impacts on what's going on in those schools. And we raise awareness and discuss the factors like the ones you see on this screen, because when you can have parents and families as advocates for what you're doing, you have the greatest advocates in the world to drive programmatic shifts and to drive change in schools, in districts, in communities, and in some ways in cities and in states. And so what we're talking about is getting those parents and families to be your greatest advocates, because when you have positive PR around whatever programming you're delivering, and you can have that through the parents, you have such a lever to change what's going on, not only in your school, but in your community, in your city writ large. Andrea, you can go to the next slide, which I think is our video. And we wanted to share a video with you to kind of really emphasize this power and impact of the role of the family and the ways that we as educators, as leaders, can pull in our family members and our family units to really tell the story for us of the impact of what can happen when schools are in fact making an effort to include everyone, to be a unifying factor for everyone in a family. And so we're going to share this video and want for you to watch and keep an eye and an ear out for the things you hear about the way that this particular community has embraced this idea of families as partners in what's going on for their young people.
In Cameroon, when you have a child with autism, the child future is like cut right there, discounted from the society, from people, everything. That's why I don't feel like I miss home. Because if I take all my kids home, they're gonna be bullied by everybody, even in my family. I have four kids with autism, four. When Prince got diagnosed with autism, that was the first time I heard the word autism. Back home, they'll say, Prince is crazy.
Are you ready?
No, I'm not happy.
Until Marjorie.
Don't bite your hands. Stop. Grow up, okay?
Video.
How old is Prince?
Video.
How old is Prince?
Video.
Keep your hands to your
Until.
What is Prince doing? Are you banging your head on the wall?
No.
When I came to United States, A lot of people talk about American dream. You have to have a wife and kids, get a house. So I have that in my mind. Then when principal was generous, everything just disappeared in my head in a minute. I was very devastated because that was my first child. In my culture, when you have a boy, it's like a gift of God. Somebody's going to keep your name.
I think we're buffering.
But to have a child who goes somewhere screaming, pushing things, doing things, it was very hard for me to accept it. I can imagine a nightmare if I have my kid. Cameroon.
My mad.
No, I'm not mad.
My kid.
No, I'm not sad.
Really?
Yes, I'm happy.
God have a plan for us to come to the United States to have our kids here.
Hey, good friends. Friends is happy.
When he went to Kenya, I saw the progress every month.
The parents were worried at first. He's been to several different kind of schools and elementary that they just had a hard time figuring out how to help Prince.
Happy. Sad.
He spoke quickly, so people had a hard time understanding him. So in result of that, he would get frustrated really easily.
Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Remember?
Special Olympics Unified Sports was a catalyst of change. I thought, you know what, this would be a great outlet for him, being able to be social with other kids, both students with and without disabilities. Our kids don't typically have typical friendships where they have those experiences at home. I think parents really appreciate the experience that Special Olympics Unified Sports gives them. People don't have maybe the best understanding of kids with autism. There's a lot of misconception about their abilities and what they can do.
So what do you think about doing a couple of your problems up there?
You just have to expect the best out of them
All right, come on up.
and push them beyond what they're showing you. Prince, he just loves numbers.
All right, do the next one.
At the end of the day, he would just take a pile of the math worksheets and stick it in his bag. And I didn't even ask him to take them home. I think it really helped the parents too, because it gave him something that was typical.
I'm like, this is amazing. How come a kid, I thought he's not going to write or read, can do math? I saw the big difference in Prince.
Hi, Prince.
He become a people person.
I say, hey. I'm fine.
Now he can go somewhere with the crowd. It's okay.
Look at this.
He's so friendly.
Guys, it's Prince.
Everybody to him is a friend of his.
Bye-bye.
One day, they invited us to come to this game. I was shocked to see my son is like a star. Everybody talk about him, people streaming. He's a great regular society. This is the place I'm supposed to be.
That moment that he was playing, I forgot that he has autism.
I was so emotional, I can't believe it.
Special Olympics unified sport really helped him.
That was the beginning of hope. Like, I started seeing hope on my kids.
Good.
He's playing basketball. I always kept looking at him like, how is he a star? I could literally look up to him.
My kids are my world. They're my everything. That's why this is my home. I'm not supposed to say that, but this is my home. And I hope one day the world will be educated and accept people with disability. It will one day come. It will one day come.
Thank you for being the video queen, Andrea. I know it gave you a little bit of difficulty at a certain point, but and yeah, it's an emotional video. We certainly acknowledge that. It is just so powerful, in my opinion, to see all of the various facets of the way that real engagement and real involvement, as I said, meaningful involvement of parents makes a difference. So we're going to utilize some of our time now to engage in some conversation and to invite you into conversation. And we've listed some questions here on the screen.
Jennifer, you got muted somehow.
I don't know what I did. Okay, thank you. So I've dropped them into the chat as well. And we're gonna invite you into some breakouts, and Andrea and I will bop into some rooms to hear some of the conversation. And just wanna hear from your perspective, the responses to some of these questions as we think about how our parents and families can be integral in ensuring that our young people are seeing success, and then our programs are seeing success, and the word can spread about the impacts that can be had when parents, schools, school communities are working collaboratively to benefit the young people that they're serving. So we're gonna go ahead and do that breakout now. And how long will we be in our breakout session?
Kelsey, you can adjust it depending on where we are in the time. I am sure. I don't have any idea at this point.
So this is Jennifer. How about, let's aim for 10 minutes.
That sounds great.
All right.
All right. Whenever you're ready, we're good to go.
Well, I hope that you all had good conversations in your breakouts. I'm sure it wasn't long enough. It never is. We're gonna do, how about if anyone had anything that they really thought would be helpful to share with others. If you all just want to speak up or raise your hand. Carol.
I think two big takeaways, and my Idaho colleagues are going to have to chime in if I missed it. But the two big takeaways that we talked about was if we are truly inclusive and having students with developmental intellectual disabilities or any disability as a part of our school community and consider them graders, then we'll need special programs less. Even if we want to encourage, look at ways to encourage social relationships among kids who are different. But and the other was, why should parents have to do more? Like, why should they have to have a role outside of the IEP? And shouldn't, even though this may be idealistic, shouldn't we expect that parents of children with even more significant support needs should have their children go to their school and be graders like everybody else and receive services.
Thanks, Carol. Other ideas that came out of the breakouts.
This is Tammy in Montana. One of our key takeaways in the group was a lot around that a lot of young people really enjoy that athletic and that social engagement with one another, and just what a phenomenal step up in the model, but also just that having that ability for all kids to participate in sports recreationally and not competitively, and to encourage that active lifestyle and just the engagement where all kids really might enjoy sports, but sometimes when it comes to, as they get older, more competitive and costs and barriers for different reasons to the competition, that it was nice to have that access and social engagement. Also just focused, another part of our conversation was focused on prior, maybe there was a focus on just access to programs, and now it's about being included in programs. So beyond just accessing things, to be fully included with those family partnerships being really meaningful.
If I can tag on quickly, Jennifer, to Tammy's comment, which I fully agree with, coming out of our small group was the statement that when you create a culture of acceptance, it doesn't go away. And we hope that we were able to kind of drive that message home, that it's good to get to a place where there's acceptance and inclusivity. And, once Prince graduates from his school, that will not change. There will still be a culture of inclusivity in that building. And that's what we're aiming for with UCS.
I just want to say thank you all for listening to our information and what we're doing with Unified Champion Schools. We know that there are many great schools out there that are not Unified Champion Schools, but our group was talking about how there was a lack of awareness of it, and we'd love to make sure that we can support environments that would like this kind of support. So we're really open to answer anybody's questions and follow up with anybody who wants more information, share more information. So please, our information is in the PowerPoint that was shared in the chat, and we're happy to follow up in any way that you would like.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, could you also add your email addresses to the chat just to make it easy?
Absolutely.
And the link to the video?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's interesting. My mind, when it comes to this, it's obvious. Most of us either have a background in special education or in a special education office now. Not every SPDIG is in the special education office of an SEA. So we're always thinking about inclusion and what real inclusion, and not just a placement, right? It's not a place, it's what's happening in that place. But I am more than ever focused on all the great benefits for the kids who are not receiving special education services. Like I brought up earlier, suicide rates are on the rise. I don't even have to go into all the other mental health issues. And if a kid feels like they've got a purpose, they've got a mission, they're part of something larger than themselves, that's, there's a lot of evidence that can make a difference. And so it's really this holistic, I think, support system that can be created and is so important. And we SIG Network will help to spread the word. And I look forward to hearing more from the states about how they make use of this. So thank you so much, Jennifer and Andrea. We loved having you. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you.
And our next presenters, as I shared before, are from Idaho. We have the Idaho SPDIG has partnered with the Idaho Library Commission. And when I first became the project officer and I read their application, I was so excited because I don't think I've ever seen another project come in partnering with the libraries, and it makes so much sense, right? Many of you projects are working on literacy. What better way to reach families, to reach kids than the library system? And in addition to that, when kids haven't always been in school and haven't had access to that during the pandemic, they may still have access to a library. So thinking about the partners that are on the ground, other ways to reach, and it takes more than just the school and a lot of the work that we do. So I'm going to have each presenter introduce themselves, again, talking about how they came to this work, their why, what experience did they have, who did they meet along the way, what brought them to this. And so, Kaylee, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and your team.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. I'm Kaylee Bunch-Woodson, and I'm the project director over here at the Idaho SPDIG. And just FYI, I'm sitting next to my colleague Shannon Dustin. So we're here together. I think I'm going to diverge a little bit from my why just after hearing that the presentation from Unified Champion Schools. Special Olympics, and I know Special Olympics is not Unified Champion Schools, but the presentation just reminded me of my uncle. My uncle Dave had Down syndrome, and he was one of the most important people in my life growing up. And I'm going to get emotional talking about him. He died a couple of years ago, but he was involved in Special Olympics to the extent that it was in his obituary that he had, I don't know, 50 gold medals in the Special Olympics. He participated in probably 15 to 20 different areas. Special Olympics was so important in his life and in all of our lives, and being able to go watch him compete and practice that I think it really is actually part of my why. I think it is part of why I am here doing this work now, that my relationship with him was so strong and so influential in my life, and Special Olympics was so important for him. So thank you for Special Olympics. So that's all that I'm going to say for my why right now. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Shannon.
Good afternoon. I am Shannon Dunstan, and I am the State Systematic Improvement Coordinator and the Early Childhood Special Ed Coordinator for the state of Idaho. My why is a long journey to get to education. I started out my professional career as a social worker, working in the state of Idaho to deinstitutionalize our state institution for individuals with disabilities. I did that work for a good 20 plus years. And at the time made a change and went to become a special ed teacher in a local school district. So my why has always been ensuring that every individual has the same opportunities to live the life that they would like to live within their life choices. And we often have found, or I have found, that in the educational system, having access to places where other people go and doing things that other families and students do has been an interesting place in the state of Idaho. Idaho is very rural, and oftentimes it can be very isolating. The partnership with the libraries is a natural partnership because every community in the state has a library, and libraries are more than just where you get books anymore. You can get games, you can go to events and listen to speakers. And I went to an art class at our public library. So the why really is to ensure that everybody has opportunities to access just day-to-day places. So with that being said, I'm going to shift it over to Stacy.
Hey everybody, thanks for letting me be a part of your group today. I'm Stacy Shaw with the Idaho Commission for Libraries. And my story actually started in the 90s. I was a classroom teacher and I worked at a Title I school. My passion has always been for early learning and at-risk students and families. I eventually left the classroom and I went and worked for an organization working with students with learning disabilities. And then the opportunity in 2008 came up to work for the commission in their early literacy program, which is called the Read to Me program. And, you know, I had felt really good about my work one-on-one with kids and families, but I just really wanted to take that passion and see if I could make a wider impact, a little bit bigger impact. And so this job has really allowed me to combine my educational experience with my passion for leveraging the playing field with kids and getting as many books in the hands of kids as we can, and really leveraging the playing field by having those opportunities in libraries, those preschool experiences and those other things that a lot of families can pay for, but that our underserved families typically cannot. And so that's really where we're focusing, is increasing access to books and print, increasing access to early learning programming. You know, libraries are for everyone. And so that has been just really, really fun for me to do that here at the commission.
All right, thanks, Stacy. And with that being said, I'm going to share our presentation and we are going to get started. All right, so thank you for having us. And I'm going to warn you in advance that Jennifer, when you told us, you know, that it's a share your story theme ever since the SIG Network national meeting, since we've been storytelling. I told Stacy and Shannon that's what you said, Jennifer, and we took that and we really ran with that. So I'm warning you all in advance. We went with the theme. So I'm going to start.
I did want to mention Kaylee and the folks in Idaho are fantastic at using different technologies. So the way that you put together your presentation looks wonderful. And if you want to share the technology you use to do it as well.
Well, Stacy really is the PowerPoint queen, I'm going to say. And we went crazy with the animations. I thought animations were strictly for the 90s, but apparently they've made their way into 2022. So here we go. I'm going to start us off. And we're going to be telling our story about how educators and librarians partnered to cultivate readers. Our Idaho SPDIG is called the Cultivating Readers Project, and you will get that as we go through. So just very quickly, before I turn it over to Stacy to start us off, some key points that we'd like you to take away is, first, that access to books is critical for children to learn to read. And I hyperlinked a web page there, and I also provided the citation at the bottom, but it is a link to a meta-analysis that was done back in 2010. And one of the outcomes that they found was that children's access to books is critical in children improving their reading outcomes. So Stacy can talk more about that if you all are interested in that study. The second is that school and library partners play a critical role in students' learning. And then third, we're going to talk about we're going to show that with our partnership, we've been able to accomplish something that we couldn't have each accomplished on our own. So Stacy, take it away.
Thanks, Kaylee. I don't know about you, there we go. Our screen's a little behind there. So I just want to tell you a little bit about who we are. The Idaho Commission for Libraries is a state agency whose mission is to build the capacity of Idaho libraries to better serve their communities. We work with all of the libraries in Idaho. We began as a state library with a collection that was available to the public, but we transitioned in 2003 as a service-only agency. So we provide consulting, resources, grants, and programs for public school, academic, special, and tribal libraries. We also house Idaho's Talking Book Service. Every state has a state library agency, whether it's a state library, it might be a commission, a nonprofit, or some other entity, but every state has some sort of entity in that role. In the chat, Shannon is going to be putting in a link here to a directory. So if you're not sure about your state's library agency, you can go to that link, the COSLA link, and find out where yours is located and what kind of entity it is. So we're going to do a little quick poll here just to get an idea of how many of you work with your state library agency. So we'd like you to take just a few seconds to submit your response to this poll. So what is your relationship with your state library's agency? Are you currently partnering? You never partnered? Do you have no idea who your state agency is? Okay, let's see if we can wrap that up and see what the results are. Okay, I kind of had a feeling that there might be a lot of not sures in the group. And to be honest with you, when I was teaching in the classroom, and even when I was, even an instructional guide outside of the classroom, I didn't know we had the Library Commission. I had no idea we even had a state librarian. So, so there's a lot to learn about your state library agency. So ICFL has 2 youth services consultants. They call me a youth services consultant, even though I don't have a library degree, I have an education degree. I focus on early learning, and then we do have another consultant, and she has a library degree and focuses on older kids and teens. We also have a school library consultant, Jeannie Standall, who is also part of this project, but she couldn't be here today. She's on the road visiting school libraries. So not many state library agencies actually have a school library consultant, but all of them, almost all of them, have a youth services consultant that you could try to contact. So we've provided early literacy training to public and school librarians for over 25 years. And we've provided some early literacy training to school librarians that receive our School Library Access Mini Grant, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later. However, we haven't really provided any training specifically focused on supporting struggling readers, which we knew we really needed to do. So I'm going to turn it over here.
Oh, sorry.
Shannon.
I was muted.
So that brings us to the Idaho State Systematic Improvement Plan that focuses on closing the reading proficiency gap for students with disability through a 3-pronged approach: a district building approach, instructional coaching, and explicit instruction. When Idaho applied and received the State Personnel Development Grant, the state leadership team reevaluated how we looked at the district's reading practices and tried to figure out where we might have some holes or places that we needed to shore up. We specifically identified parent input and not utilizing our school libraries as a focus. In Idaho, most elementary students spend at least 1 instructional period a week in their school library. However, many of our school librarians have little or no formalized training. Additionally, we were hypothesizing that few of our librarians would know how to engage a struggling reader in content and choosing appropriate material for their interests. We often find that there's this old premise on Lexile scores, and if you have not been trained as a librarian or you are of an older generation, you might keep students focused on books that are of their reading ability versus their interest.
So just a little background about our partnerships. Our partnership together, our agency has worked with Idaho's State Department of Education off and on for years. However, when Shannon came to the Department of Early Childhood Special Ed in 2011, she really opened the door to partnering more. Our school library consultant, Jeannie, serves on the State Department's Enhanced Literacy Collaborative and some other special projects. And I've provided like 3-hour literacy training for one of Shannon's statewide SESTA trainings. Shannon and I both serve on other statewide committees and initiatives together, such as the planning committee for our state's early years conference, our ACT Early Idaho, which is the state subsidiary, I guess, for the CDC's Learn the Signs Act Early, the Governor's Early Childhood Advisory Committee, and gosh, just all sorts of other projects and groups that focus on early learning. And back in 2012, we worked with Shannon to survey all of the existing developmental preschool programs about their relationships with the school and public libraries and whether or not their kiddos had access to books. And then we also surveyed the elementary schools in the state about how many books they checked out, the school librarians checked out per week to kindergarten and first grade students, and also to preschool kids if they had one of those programs on site. And the results showed that a very large percentage, unfortunately, of schools were only allowing kindergartners to check out like 1 book at a time, and first graders up to maybe 2 books at a time, because they were so concerned about book loss. So this was kind of the impetus for our focus on providing more access to books through the school library. We were able to secure state funding to allow book buying grants of up to $5,000 for school libraries. And those awarded agreed to attend a full day training and to check out more than 2 books per semester to kindergarten and first grade students, and also to the preschool students if there was a program on site. So this program is still active, and we train 25 to 30 school library staff per year. The training includes information about early literacy, mostly focused on vocabulary development, but it doesn't focus on struggling readers or reading disabilities. So providing the rationale for school library staff to provide wider access to books for pre and beginning readers really remains a focus for us. As school library staff, there's just so much turnover with them. And as Shannon mentioned earlier, very little training provided by the school district. So we are training new folks every year. And in the chat, Shannon put in there a link to our school library access mini grant program if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that. So whenever possible, we encourage school and public libraries to partner together to support the children in their communities, but there's just a lot of barriers out here in Idaho. So we're always looking for ways to provide partnership opportunities with incentives and scheduled meetings or trainings.
As Stacy mentioned, the State Department of Education has partnered with the Idaho Commission for Libraries on early literacy since 2011. It seemed like a natural next step to work to educate our school and public librarians on the importance of engaging struggling readers in our respective libraries. In many of the school libraries, again, the librarians, whether they're trained or not, often do not connect students with books. And this was often a real turnoff for students when the librarian would go to one section of the library when they might be interested in a different topic.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Instruction is basic, and books are the critical tool for practicing and enjoyment. So if a student does not have access to the material that piques their interest and keeps them engaged, we're missing huge opportunities for them to practice their reading skills. Additionally, in our training, we focus on the layout of both public and school libraries to further engage our students in reading. There's somewhat of a concept of setting it up like a bookstore. So there's a dinosaur corner where a student can go and find all things about dinosaurs versus the old Dewey Decimal classification where books are organized by topic, or I'm sorry, I'm not the librarian. Stacy can go into how the Dewey Decimal System works. But so looking at our environments and putting books in baskets and making books for younger children accessible and on a level that they can access. So to also say that many of our schools and public libraries in our rural communities are already partnering with our community librarians, bringing books to the school for students to check out, offering story time both in the public library and in the elementary school, or oftentimes helping with field trip opportunities. This new collaboration will only strengthen our partnership. Additionally, our library staffs are improving their knowledge and getting updated practices.
All right, so I get the honor of introducing to you all the work that we are doing now with the Idaho Commission for Libraries. So with the support of the SPDIG, we were able to develop a memorandum of understanding with the Idaho Commission for Libraries, where we subawarded them funds to contract with a literacy expert slash professor at Boise State University and an expert librarian who actually started as a paraprofessional in a classroom, then moved on to be the school librarian and is now the public librarian at a public library in Lewiston, Idaho. She has over 30 years of experience. The two of them developed a training for us. It has both asynchronous and synchronous components. The asynchronous portion is around a 4-hour training, and then we follow up with a synchronous portion of a live debrief session, and I'll talk about both of those a little bit more. And this training is for public and school librarians whose schools are currently participating in our Greater Cultivating Readers project. So schools apply to participate in the overall Cultivating Readers project to improve reading outcomes for students with disabilities. And then we reach out to their school librarians to participate in the training. And we identify the public libraries that are in the communities of those schools. And we reach out to the public librarians as well to participate in the training. So I am actually going to walk you all through the asynchronous portion of the training that we've developed so you can visually see what it looks like. You can see some of the content, and we'll talk a little bit about what the training entails. So I'm actually going to leave PowerPoint and bring up the training. The training, the asynchronous portion is housed in an LMS called Niche Academy, and that's what the Idaho Commission for Libraries uses to house all of their trainings. Oh, I'm being told that can't see it. I'm going to stop sharing and try to do a new share. Let's see. I thought I shared my screen. All right, are y'all able to see that now? Yes. Okay, got to make sure that I clicked share sound. Yes, I did. Sorry about that. Technical issues. So this is what the LMS Niche Academy looks like. And this is where the Idaho Commission for Libraries houses all of their trainings that they develop. The purpose of having it in Niche Academy is we're partnering with Idaho Commission for Libraries, but many school and public librarians already have a login for Niche Academy, and it's free to create an account, and anyone can create a Niche Academy account. So I'm going to direct your attention over here to the right-hand side bar, and please put in the chat box or unmute if you have any questions about, how it was developed, what the content is. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone has, and Shannon and Stacy can also help answer those questions. So it says here that it's 2 hours and 24 minutes, but we think it's probably around 4 hours for folks to complete. And participants start by completing a pre-training survey where we collect some data that I'll talk a little bit about later. And the training is broken down into 6 parts. And within each part is some content. Where you see over here on the right side, there's the little paper icon. These are all videos or other types of training content. And then from there, there's always a reflection or an application, some sort of activity to practice the skills or the knowledge that was presented in the training portion. And then there's also a resources page at the end that has the links to additional resources or any of the resources that were mentioned in the training portion. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through so you can see what the training topics are, so you can get a feel for what the librarians are learning through the training. So part 2, understanding reading difficulties. And Stacy and Shannon, feel free to jump in if you want to mention anything about the content. Part 3, supporting motivation and self-efficacy through inclusive collections. Connecting readers with books. Creating an inclusive library. And then review an application. I think these application pieces are really awesome. In these application pieces, there's a prompt or a question, and the participant enters in their information, and then everything that they submitted in that application is connected to a Google Sheet. And at the end of the training, everyone who participated has the link to the Google Sheet, and they can kind of collaborate asynchronously with their colleagues by seeing what their colleagues talked about in their submission. So for example, one of them is if you know a title of a book that would contribute to an inclusive library, it has them enter it there, and then everyone can see what all of their colleagues around the state submitted into that Google Sheet. And then finally, the last piece of the training is to create a professional action plan. So we provide the template, and they fill out the action plan with how they're going to implement the strategies, the timeline, how they're going to evaluate, and they submit that to us. And then there's a post-training survey as well. So I am going, if it's going to let me, I was going to play a couple of minutes of a video so that you can see what that looks like. So let me try to do that. There we go.
Now we're going to talk about some strategies for building an inclusive library environment. In previous modules, we talked about the ways to build a collection that supports children's development as readers. In this module, we'll talk about the physical library space as well as library programming that can help to build an inclusive library environment. First, and most importantly, equip the library with friendly, welcoming, and kind-spirited library staff. I know this sounds simple, but it is vital. Libraries, especially in schools, can become a safe place for children with disabilities during recess and other breaks. Children with sensory sensitivities can find a place of refuge among the library from the noisy playground atmosphere. Create a positive memory in a child's mind of what it felt like to visit the library. It should be warm, fuzzy, and happy. Grow lifelong library users by creating a space that is welcoming to all. Remember that not all members of your staff will understand what you are trying to do, and that is okay. Most of us grew up with one idea of what a library should look like. So if your staff seems resistant to change, they likely don't understand the purpose. This is a great opportunity to provide them with additional training in fostering an inclusive environment. Such training should be encouraged by library administration for library support staff so you can work as a cohesive team. Have creative spaces
So
with
I
art
was planning
supplies.
on showing you a little bit more because I think it's super exciting, but I realized that we only have 9 minutes. So I'm going to stop there, and so we can finish our presentation. And I think oh, it went back. Great. So at the end of the training, all of the participants have access to this dashboard that our consultants created. It has the links to all of the resources. And then over here on the right-hand side where it says Action Plan Resources, here where it says results in these 3 squares, that's the Google Sheets that I was talking about, where folks can access their colleagues around the state's submissions. And then the professional action plan instructions and template for submitting their implementation plan. And then Stacy's going to talk about the awesome incentive that folks receive.
Yeah, so when we did that study back in 2012, we found out, and then things haven't really changed since 2012, that over half of our school libraries in Idaho have 0 book buying budget every year allotted to them by their schools or districts. So in order to implement the strategies emphasized in our training, we wanted to purchase book sets for all the libraries that participated in the training. Our contract with Shannon and Kaylee allotted a book buying budget that allowed us to purchase between 20 and 25 books per library. We have quite a bit of book buying power with publishers and vendors, and we generally can get hardcover books for about $10 a piece. So Jeannie and I, our school library consultant, reviewed the content and the modules, and then we chose books published within the last 2 years that supported the development of early literacy skills, that were high interest to struggling or non-motivated readers, that provided great opportunities for parents and caregivers to read aloud with the children, and that generally just had high kid appeal. And then some of these have characters with a disability that they work through, or how they see things, or a lot about perseverance. So we purchased a mixture of picture books, early chapter books, graphic novels, and poetry, both fiction and nonfiction. Most of the titles that we chose received starred reviews or were award winners. So it's good to have librarians on your team to choose books, because we tend to have access to resources that educators may not have or be aware of. And we do have the annotated bibliography for the titles that we provided, and we can share that later for anybody that wants to see it.
Stacy, I'm going to actually just really quickly skim through some of the data that we collect. We collect both quantitative and qualitative data. You did see in the asynchronous training that we collect pre-post data. So we do a little knowledge assessment pre and post that has some multiple choice questions on the content of the training. We also ask them to report pre and post on their self-perceptions of their knowledge and skills according to the learning objectives. So we do have those self-reports. We also do a post-training survey where we ask them about the quality of the training, and of course, the number of completers. So far we've had, according to Stacy's log, 43 librarians have completed both the asynchronous and the synchronous follow-up debrief session, and then 50, I believe, around 50 that have completed just the asynchronous portion. In terms of the qualitative data, we haven't done a formal analysis of the qualitative data that we've collected, but we collect data in the professional action plans, the participant responses to some of the questions that we asked them to talk about in the live debrief sessions. And then we also plan to follow up with a survey at the end of the year to ask them how they actually implemented the strategies over the course of the year. So I wanted to actually just give you 1 minute to read through this. In the live debrief session, the hour-long sessions are hosted by the training developers along with the Idaho Commission for Libraries and the Idaho State Department of Ed. And these sessions focus on 3 questions. The questions are the participants' ahas during the training, how they plan to implement the strategies, and how they might partner with their public or school library. So this was just a Jamboard from one of our recent debrief sessions that we had, like I think last week or the week before. And this was participants' responses to that first question: what was your biggest aha moment? So I'm just going to give about 30 seconds for folks to take a look at that. And if you do have any response, or if you have an aha, feel free to put that in the chat box. So I think it's kind of cool for you all to be able to see kind of what a piece of the story of the participants is in this slide. Okay, I'm going to move on. So just quickly, where we'd like to go with the evaluation. We'd like to do a qualitative analysis of those action plans so we can really see what strategies folks are taking away from that training and what they're planning to implement in their libraries. We'd also like to figure out a way to evaluate the fidelity of implementation of those strategies, which might be a challenge being that everyone's implementing something different in theory. But I also think it would be really awesome to evaluate the impact that the strategies or the implementation is having on students. And what comes to mind is potentially doing a participatory evaluation with those librarians so that they could kind of design the evaluation and how it would work in their library and how they would assess that with their students that access the library in their context.
We also wanted to let you know what districts and public libraries were participating. So this is just a map of the state with annotations to show you where the districts and the libraries that are participating. I would like to assure you we are not ignoring the middle part of the state. Most of Idaho's middle section is national wilderness area, so we don't have a lot of schools or public libraries in the center of our state. And we also want to tell you what's happening next. This is so exciting. We had such a good response from this year that we are going to space. And what that means is we're going to create a second module series that looks at how to connect ebooks and audiobooks and other materials to struggling readers from both our public and our school libraries. We have a need to ensure that students have access to material that if they have an interest, they can listen to that book on tape and follow along with a paper copy book or just enjoy that story. There's a lot of support that says audiobooks builds comprehension and vocabulary and students' reading ability as we're teaching those students the foundations of reading skills. Super excited, books in space.
So that's all that we have for you. I think we're right on time. We would have loved some more interaction and to hear from all of you, but didn't want to keep you over time. But we will be here for questions. There also was one more poll that Stacy, if you think that we want to do that, we can do that. Otherwise,
real quick.
Yeah,
it'll make us feel good if you do.
Okay, it'll make us feel good if you do the poll. Kelsey, thank you.
Great. Hi there, folks. I'm Dave Gardino, Jennifer's colleague here at OSEP in RTP, and she asked that I help wrap things up for her while she's had to step away. But as you're taking the poll, again, I just want to say what a great creative project with some tremendous potential outreach with all the libraries and kids that attend those libraries. So thanks again to Kaylee, Shannon, and Stacy from Idaho SPDIG sharing this project. Hopefully it gave others some great ideas on some connections that could be made like that. I also want to thank Andrea and Jennifer from Project Unify and hoping to create greater awareness on that part of Special Olympics, because I think it's not as something as familiar with folks, but the potential there and the impact it's having is just tremendous. And so again, thank you for coming and sharing a little bit about that. And I hope folks will follow up with all the speakers today. So thank you again to all of our speakers and for all of you who participated.